NASA's Artemis II didn't just go to the moon. It captured something no human mission had ever recorded before. 8,000 lines of resolution, aimed at the lunar surface from 200,000 miles away. What came back wasn't footage, it was something closer to a religious experience. Over the next 10 minutes, you are going to watch the full visual arc of that mission. Launch, deep space, and lunar approach. Cut and graded like a Hollywood film. Every previous crewed mission gave us grainy windows and postage stamp frames that asked you to imagine the rest. Artemis II gave us something that fills the entire screen with impossible, aching clarity. The lunar terminator, that razor line between light and shadow, rendered in detail that stops your breath mid-inhale. You can see the texture of ancient craters, the slow curve of a world that has no weather and no mercy. This is what 8,000 lines of resolution actually means. Not a spec sheet number, but a feeling that lands somewhere behind your ribs. The Space Launch System sits on Pad 39B in the gray hour before sunrise, breathing liquid oxygen into the cold Florida air. At full resolution, you can count the rivets on the mobile launcher tower, every weld seam sharp as a photograph. The ground cameras are locked at distances that still feel dangerously, uncomfortably close to something this large. Then, the ignition sequence begins, and the RS-25 engines tear a hole in the morning that no camera has ever quite survived intact. Steam and fire roll outward in a wave that moves faster than the sound chasing it across the marsh. The crawlerway shudders, the water deluge system erupts, and 8,000 lines of resolution capture every detail at once. You don't watch this launch so much as you absorb it, the way a body absorbs a shockwave rather than hearing it. The vehicle climbs on a column of light that rewrites the horizon line completely. And then, in the span of about 90 seconds, the violence simply stops, and there is only the dark above. Once the engines cut, something unexpected fills the capsule. Not darkness, but a kind of impossible clarity. The windows frame a black so deep it stops feeling like a color and starts feeling like a place. Earth hangs behind them now, enormous and luminous, but the crew isn't looking back just yet. They're watching the void ahead, where distance has no landmarks, and light travels without anything to land on. Every camera aboard Orion was capturing this, the texture of nothing, rendered in 8,000 lines of resolution. You can see the reflection of instrument panels ghosted across the glass, crew members suspended in their harnesses like exhibits in a museum of the future. The silence in this footage isn't the absence of sound. It's the presence of something the atmosphere back home was always covering up. No weather, no scatter, no blue. Just the raw, unfiltered geometry of space itself. This is what the void between worlds actually looks like. And it's nothing like you imagine. At 200,000 miles out, Earth stops being a place and becomes a thing. It hangs in the black, like a marble someone forgot to put away, impossibly small. Every ocean, every city, every argument anyone ever had fits inside that pale, glowing circle. The astronauts pressed their faces to the windows and saw a world that had no visible borders, no audible noise. There's something the photographs can't fully prepare you for, and that's the sheer quiet of it. The Orion cameras captured it in 8K resolution, every wisp of cloud rendered in extraordinary, almost cruel detail. You can see weather systems that will kill people, and from up there, they look like brushstrokes. The further the spacecraft traveled, the smaller Earth became, and the harder it was to look away. Distance doesn't diminish a thing you love, it just shows you what it actually is. That blue light wasn't a backdrop. It was the only home any human being has ever known. For the first few days, the moon is just a bright smear against the black, almost indistinguishable from a distant star. Then the cameras catch something the naked eye misses. A curve, a rim, a suggestion of mass pressing against the dark. It grows the way a storm grows on the horizon, slow at first, then suddenly, undeniably, there. The Terminator line carves the surface into light and shadow with a sharpness that feels almost surgical, almost violent. Every crater rim throws a shadow long enough to measure, long enough to feel the scale of what you're looking at. The regolith isn't gray the way a textbook tells you. It's layered, textured, ancient in a way that registers somewhere below conscious thought. You stop thinking about distance and start thinking about depth. The limb of the moon rises into frame like a wall at the edge of the world, and the crew is already close enough to see it breathe. Not metaphorically, the Terminator shifts, the shadows move, and the surface seems to exhale across 4 billion years of silence. This is the moment the mission stops being a number on a trajectory chart and becomes something you can almost reach out and touch. The surface fills the frame, and suddenly there's nowhere else in the universe to look. Every crater carries its own shadow, sharp-edged and permanent, carved by impacts that predate every living thing on Earth. 8,000 lines of resolution means you're not watching footage. You're hovering above a world that hasn't changed in 1 billion years. The regolith stretches in every direction, pale gray and impossibly textured, like ash that was never disturbed. Ridgelines rise and fall across the Terminator, lit at angles that make stone look like sculpture. No atmosphere softens anything here. Every feature is exactly as hard and exact as physics allows. The camera's locked onto this surface from low approach altitude, closer than any crewed mission had come in over 50 years. What they captured wasn't just documentation, it was proof that proximity changes everything about how we understand a place. You can trace individual boulder fields, ejecta patterns, ancient lava flows frozen mid-pour across the basin floor. This is the footage that archivists will pull in 100 years to show what the moon actually looked like. Not interpreted, not rendered, not imagined, recorded, at full fidelity, by people who were actually there. 4 human beings were strapped into that capsule when every one of those frames was captured. Reed Wiseman commanded the mission, a naval aviator who had already spent 6 months aboard the International Space Station. Victor Glover flew as pilot, the first black astronaut to travel beyond low Earth orbit on a crewed mission. Christina Koch was the first woman to leave Earth's gravitational neighborhood, a milestone that the footage quietly carries in every shot. Jeremy Hansen, a Canadian astronaut, became the first non-American to fly on a deep space crewed mission in history. These weren't passengers watching the moon drift past a window. They were the reason the cameras had anything worth pointing at. Every wide shot of the lunar surface gains a different weight when you remember a human hand framed it. The scale of what they witnessed wasn't abstract data. It was a lived, physical, irreversible experience. And the footage they brought back doesn't just document a mission, it carries the specific gravity of 4 actual lives. Every frame of this mission is already a primary source for the next 100 years of history. The people who study humanity's expansion outward will return to this footage, again and again. They won't watch it for data. They'll watch it to feel what it was like to be alive at this moment. That's what separates a document from an artifact. And Artemis II crossed that line. The Earth hanging in the black, those 4 faces pressed against the cupola glass. That's not spectacle anymore. It's evidence. Evidence that we actually went, that we looked back, and that we chose to keep going. Every mission that follows will carry this footage in its bones, whether anyone says so or not.